Go ahead.
Tell me when.
When? Go for it.
Okay, this is Paul Hellyer, former Defense Minister for Canada, listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
Welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Angels, and we are internationally syndicated, starting with our home base, 107.7 FM, New Orleans, Louisiana, as well as all the terrestrial affiliates in the U.S., Canada, South America, and the world, as a matter of fact. One of those affiliates is one network that's actually carried me for years. That is Deprogrammed Radio Network in the UK, which also they have terrestrial stations in London and Leeds. And what I just found out, they also have terrestrial stations in the EU. That's right, folks. And iHeartMedia carries us. Spreaker carries us. I believe iTunes even still carries my show. I'm not quite sure on that one, but there's a lot of places you can listen, folks. Now today, just like yesterday, we have not one but two special guests. On the second hour, we'll be talking about consciousness, because consciousness is very, very important for all of you people and guys and gals to understand. At whatever level you understand it at this point, there is much more to be learned. There's always more. There's always room to learn more. The first hour is what we've been talking for over a week. Good friend of mine, it's been over 4 years in the making to get him back to do this show. You could hear his past shows on Dr. J Radio Live. And today, we got him for only 1 hour, but believe me, folks, it's going to be an hour that you've all been waiting for. So without further ado, I've sort of gave you plenty of comments of who we're talking to. So let me just go ahead and introduce him. I said he is the former Defense Minister of Canada, the Honorable Paul Hellyer. Welcome back to the show, dear friend.
It's my pleasure, Johnny, to be back with you. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I've been looking forward to it for a long time.
And as have I, because as we speak off air a lot, I always enjoy speaking to you. Our interests are the same, essentially. That's why I always look to you for faith and for understanding what is going on in this world. Let me start with that fundamental question, because of your last book, which is real still to this day, over 4.5 years later after I bought it, Money Mafia. Fantastic book. But it seems to me that I'll let you take this over. What's going on with the finances in this world this day? The Trilateral Commission, the World Bank, the Federal Reserve.
Well, I think what the problem is at the moment, it's not a problem, it's interesting. But the White House has been making waves concerning the actions of the Fed. And the Fed is maintaining the myth, and it is a myth, that central bankers know what is best for the world and for the United States, and nobody else does. Well, they couldn't be more wrong. The Fed, in my opinion, has been one disaster right from the beginning, and it should never have been agreed to. 105 years ago or so, it was the concoction of several of the richest, most ruthless bankers in the world who put together this idea and got it through Congress late in December, when I think the Congress people were thinking more of sugar plum fairies than they were about their work. And it's been a bad thing. It's been a ring around the neck of the United States and of the world ever since. And of course, the president who approved it, a couple of years later, said it was the worst mistake he'd ever made. But I think this is the most interesting thing. It was acknowledged that it was the most biggest mistake that Congress had ever made, because what they did was really to take the patent for United States money, which belongs to the people. It belongs to the ordinary citizens of the United States, the right to make their own money, and the Congress gave it to the several most powerful bankers and the richest bankers in the world free, and it's been downhill ever since, because the bankers were a sly group, and they started manufacturing money out of thin air and then lending it to the government and requiring it to be paid back with interest. And now you have, I think, a debt of something like $20 trillion, which should have been zero, not 20 trillion, and would have been if you'd gotten rid of the Fed immediately after it had been originally created by Congress. So this is probably, I figure, the second or third most important problem in the world, and something has to be done about it. And the central bankers were all upset with the possibility of political interference, because they have created the myth that they're above the law, that they're above politics, that they're above the needs of the people, and that they know what is best for the world. And believe me, that is wrong, wrong, wrong. The banking system created the Great Depression of the 1930s. 1929, the Wall Street bank started selling short, brought on the Great Depression, which caused more problems for the ordinary people of the world than has ever happened, under any other circumstances. And then again in 2007 and 8, they started short selling, and this too was an inside job. Speaking of the first one again, there was a congressional committee, the Senate Committee on Finance, that looked into what had happened in 1929-30. It's called the Picora Report, and it's well worth reading because he just tears a strip off the banks like you wouldn't believe. And so I would say that probably number 2 in the world today is for the United States to nationalize the Fed, buy it back, only pay a reasonable price for it, because they've been robbing the people for more than 100 years, and this has got to stop, because all money today is created as debt. Is debt that has to be repaid with interest, and yet nobody creates any money with which to pay it back. So this economically and mathematically, this is absurd, and it's been going on for, I guess about it's been going on a long time, 300 years or so, going back to the days when the Bank of England was first brought into being. King William had been fighting a war with France and run out of money and was losing. He needed more money for armaments. So somebody said, why don't you create a bank? His credit was no good. So he got Parliament to approve the Bank of England. The rich people in London put up £1,200,000 in gold and silver, and lent it all. The bank lent it all to the king at 8%, which is a pretty high interest rate for a guaranteed loan. But then the king said to the bank, to show my appreciation, you may print, that's PRINT, £1,200,000 in banknotes and lend them to your rich friends. So the bank was able to lend the same money to 2 different groups at the same time and collect interest from each. And that's what we call leverage, 2 to 1. And bankers are a greedy lot. So over the years, they have increased this leverage. In the early years of the 20th century, a federally incorporated bank, the chartered bank in the United States, had to have a gold reserve of 25%. In other words, the banks could lend the same money 4 times. When I was young in Canada, we had to have our banks had to have an 8% cash reserve. And that means they could lend the same money 13.5 times. Well, then later along comes Milton Friedman with his ideas, which were great in the classroom, but certainly were not intended to work in the real world. And the banks managed to get the ratio up to 20-1.
Wow. Okay, that's good.
Can you imagine lending the same money to 20 different individuals or governments or businesses and getting money interest from every single one of them?
No, that's bad. That's disgusting, because if people need to, if there's a bank run, everybody's going to be broke. No one's going to get their money.
Well, that's right, unless the central banks bail them out, which is the only reason that this great Ponzi scheme hasn't collapsed long ago. But the problem is the whole world is in debt, and we're underspending for some of the important things like education and healthcare and infrastructure and other things, because it has to be done on money that you either get by taxes or by borrowing. So you just keep going further and further into debt. And what the world needs is a massive infusion of government-created debt-free money, underline debt-free money, that does not have to be paid back. In the book that you mentioned, The Money Mafia, A World in Crisis, I explain a perfectly sensible way that can be done without rocking the boat. But what it would do is 2 things. It would mean that ultimately the governments would have 34% of the new money created every year, and that would be enough to balance their budgets at the federal level, the state level, and the municipal level, and with lower taxes than at the present time, and that the ratio of the banks would be reduced from 20-1, which is just grand larceny, just ridiculous, to 2-1, like it was when the Bank of England was first incorporated. Johnny, would you believe that the present system is so bad, is such a ripoff, that about, I would say 6 or 8 years ago, 88 families own 50% of all the wealth in the world. And 2 years later, it was 82. And in 2016, it was 62.
Jeez. I guarantee you the Putins and the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers are some of those families.
Well, they're sure. They're the names have never been published, but people know a lot of people know who the rich families are. And I can't get my mind around people owning 62 families owning half of the world, the wealth in the whole world. I tried a little mental exercise, like you start in Asia with the Peking and Hong Kong and Tokyo cities, and then across the pond to Vancouver and San Francisco and Los Angeles, and then across the country to New York and Montreal and Toronto and other U.S. countries, not to mention Mexico City, and across the pond to Manchester and London, and Paris and Bonn and so on, right around the world, the whole world. And every second one of those cities is owned lock, stock, and barrel by 62 families that you could put on one suburban street.
That's actually really sad. And Mr. Hellier, this is a question that I always ask myself. What do you need all that money for? At what point is enough money enough? What can't you buy with $20 million that you need $50 billion? What can't you buy with $50 billion that you need $150 billion? It doesn't make sense. I mean, you already
You're
own islands and boats. I'm shocked.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely so. But what about a few trillion?
Yeah,
And this is a time when people are dying from starvation,
that's right.
and others barely have enough money to keep a roof over their heads and pay the next mortgage payment. So it is so unfair. It is such a ripoff that for these bankers to say that they are sacrosanct and no politician can touch them or change the system or want them to be reduced to something that would be reasonable as far as their leverage is concerned. So they would still have enough money to support small businesses when they needed it and to help businesses expand. But they wouldn't have this Ponzi scheme, which would just make them rich from printing money, and not only that, but we're not talking tonight about the cabal and who's running the world, but the banking system is the most powerful system in the world, and they really call the shots, and that power has to be broken. The banking system is something like a snake that goes around you and tightens up until it has you by the short of its tail, And what has to be done is that the head has to be chopped off the snake and a system installed which makes sense, not just for the bankers, but for all of the people of the world. And I would rate it, very, very highly. And so as far as any president or prime minister saying that we've got to change the banking system and that they are not exempt from common sense, which they have been for years and years, I'm saying 3 cheers for them for trying to puncture the balloon of the myth that bankers know best and we know nothing. So more power to them, and a lot of people don't know how money is created, but the way it is here, and I think it's similar in the U.S., if you need $35,000 to buy a car, you go and see your friendly banker, and they ask you for collateral. Do you have any stocks and bonds? And if you say no, they'll say, what about a second mortgage on your house or your cottage? And if you don't have that, well, they'll probably say, how about getting a signature from a rich relative or friend? And once they're satisfied, they ask you to sign a note. And you sign the note for the $35,000, and then they'll set an interest rate of prime plus, whatever, 1%, 2%, or 3%, depending on the color of your eyes.
That's right.
And it's a demand note that you have to pay back whenever they say. But then once you've done that, they walk over to the computer and tap a few keys, and presto, $35,000 appears as a deposit in your bank account. Seconds earlier, that money did not exist.
It only exists in computers. Right?
Pardon me?
It only exists in computers.
That's right. And so, it's the biggest myth in banking, and I had took me years to persuade one of my friends who was a former banker that this was true. The myth is that when you go in to borrow that money, you're borrowing money that I or somebody else deposited a week or a month or a year before. That's not true. That the chances of that being true are infinitesimal. They manufacture that money just for you, especially for you, and the banks have no money to lend. They don't have cash reserves anymore. The reserves I was talking about a few minutes ago, they don't have them anymore. They have to have a little capital, but they don't have to have cash reserves. And it is a really, really rotten system, rotten to the core. And the sooner the people wake up and insist on something really fundamental, the better off that the world will be. And I think better off that a lot of the bankers will be too, because they'll have to start going straight for a while and realizing that there's more to life than having 100 times more money than anybody could possibly spend if they tried hard to do it. So that's one of the big problems. And as I think I mentioned when we were talking for a minute or two earlier, the two other problems that really worry me. First of all, the arms race.
Yes, yes, especially with more countries that want to produce nuclear weapons like Iran.
Well, not only produce nuclear weapons like Iran, but there was a story here, I don't know if it's true or not, that the United States government was considering giving nuclear technology to the Saudis.
Oh, jeez. I wouldn't be surprised because, as you remember with the journalist Khashoggi who was killed, and clearly that today there was a veto at the executive level to veto ending the support of Saudi Arabia in Yemen. So we, the United States, and it's I don't know whatever coalitions are involved, are still fighting the Yemenis with fighting side by side with the Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely, and if they got atomic power, it would, in my opinion, be the fast road to a nuclear Armageddon in the Middle East.
Yes, first being Israel.
Pardon me?
First would be Israel once they get
it would be go right across the Middle East, yeah, and then it could spread to the rest of the world, and we could wind up with a planet that is uninhabitable. This has happened before in other jurisdictions and maybe in our own as well, and we're getting closer to it all the time. And the atomic clock now is at 1 minute to midnight, and we've got to start reducing our armaments instead of getting more, and bringing down the proportion of the national wealth that's being spent for killing machines. And this sort of brings me to the other major problem, and they're connected, and that is global warming.
Yes.
And,
as I was mentioning before we went on air, is that hurricanes have now become so big that they are adding a new category for hurricanes that have winds over 175 miles per hour. When I was growing up, there was never a 9.0 or above earthquake except for Alaska in the 50s. Now they're all over the place, all the time. Every year we're having another one. And weird weather, Mr. Hallier, is just getting worse.
Well, this is going to continue. And I think I mentioned to you that my first book of what I call the trilogy, which is called Light at the End of the Tunnel, as a survival plan for the human species. The first chapter was on global warming. I quoted Dr. James Hansen, who had written an absolutely fantastic book, poo-pooing most of the illegitimate naysayers that there are. And the subtitle of the book was The Storms of My Grandchildren. Well, as you're just hinting, the only thing that was wrong with the book was that the storms have started faster than he anticipated. And they're already going on.
Yes, massive levels. And one thing, if you remember, California never had tornadoes. There was even this movie 20 years ago called Day After Tomorrow, where just to show how weird the weather was in that movie, that they had tornadoes in California. But then we started seeing some, not massive like you see in Tornado Alley, but large enough to start destroying some cars and uprooting trees. And it's like, wow, we have tornadoes in California. What's next? And then this past year was the hottest it's ever been in Southern California. I was alarmed because all my life, whatever it was here in the San Fernando Valley, it was always 20 degrees more in Death Valley. This past summer, it was 117 degrees in Encino when it was 115 in Death Valley. First time in history.
Right. And getting worse. This is the problem. And it will get worse. And I think the line that comes to my mind is, if coal and oil live, people will die, thousands of them. And the problem is that some of those people could be someone who was near and dear to any one of us. Look at the ravage in Africa just recently, where a whole area was absolutely decimated by a storm, and about 400 people died, something like that. And then a few days later, just a few days ago, there was a violent storm in Iraq, the Kurdish part of Iraq. It hit two cities, inundated them, and there were casualties. I'm not sure how many. I think one of the papers said 40. And then a few days later, there was a storm in Iran that created absolute decimation of a whole area. And again, there were casualties, a number of them. And this is going to go on and on and on unless we do something about it. And so I am suggesting that we use a little common sense. When I wrote Light at the End of the Tunnel 8 years ago, I said I thought we had about 10 years to do something about global warming. Well, 8 years have gone by, and time is running out.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to get busy.
I would definitely agree with that.
I would like to set a goal, not of 29 or 30 years, the way the politicians are talking. Did you read that article about the little Norwegian girl, 16 years old, who was sarcastic and told the leaders of the world that they weren't taking this problem seriously enough?
No.
Well, she was right. In my latest book, Hope Restored, I have to say that the leaders of the 20 nations, the group of 20, are like 20 Neros. Nero was fiddling on his violin while Rome burns, and our guys are just fiddling as the planet is burning, and something has to be done. So when I take a fast track like that, people say, "Well, that's ridiculous," but it isn't ridiculous, really. Because I saw something during World War II. I was there, and what we did then, we took all of the automobile companies, and all of the refrigerator companies, and all of the washing machine companies, and converted them into armaments plants, and that's helped speed up the war and contributed to the victory. Well, what we have to do now is just the exact reverse. Just take the armaments plants and convert them into zero-point energy plants. Most people haven't even heard of zero-point energy because the controlled press won't talk about them. But this is the energy that exists everywhere in the cosmos, and it's free. And the technology exists. Dr. Michael Wolff, who had a ultra top secret clearance, said in a radio broadcast, I think of 19 years ago, that the United States, in cooperation with one of the alien species, had created both cold fusion and zero-point energy. Well, I personally prefer zero-point energy because it's neat and clean. You can put a little box about 2 or 3 feet square, and it's enough to provide all of the power you need for anything that you need it for. And so what I'm suggesting is that we start right away converting those armaments plants into zero-point energy plants, and go all out in an effort to, in 5 years, go as far as we can to replace every car, truck, tractor, boat, airplane, and house in the world with a zero-point energy box. And if we did, then the worst of global warming effects would never occur. But if we don't do that, we're going to be in terrible trouble. And all of the good scientists now are really predicting that it's going to be one awful mess. A lot of people are going to die, and the cost of fixing up the damage done by all of these storms is going to be enormous. You won't be able to get insurance for anything, and it's going to be something that we can't afford. People say we can't afford to change over to clean energy, but boy, my take on it is we can't afford not to. That's the way we've got to go, and so I'm really hoping that we can get some serious discussion on this matter, and that somebody will take the lead. A speech over the weekend: no more soap operas of getting all the countries together and setting another date 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years down the line when we've got to do this or so. But to have somebody just jump the gun and say, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it right away, and if they do, other countries, the rest of the world will follow suit, and we'll maybe save the world for our children and grandchildren, and in my case, great-grandchildren. I keep thinking of them whenever I want to give up.
Yes, and just like I do with my almost 3-year-old goddaughter, what kind of life is she going to have, if one at all? Now, let me say a couple of points to what you just said. First of all, China, with its rockets and our rockets that we use right now, we are using technology from over 1,000 years ago. We're burning chemicals to create a reaction to have internal combustion to power up rockets and even the cars. That right there needs to stop. With the zero-point energy, not only has it existed, several people have created this on Earth, but every time the patent office gets a hold of it, they seize the patent for national security reasons. I'm kind of hoping with this interview today, Mr. Hellier, and your influence with the politicians you have in Canada, and the fact that you did baptize the current Prime Minister of Canada, maybe some people that are holding the patents can finally open them up to science.
Well, I would personally, I would just buy big, borrow, or steal them, because we're talking about the future of the planet here. We're not talking about some hypothetical thing.
Nope.
And no one has the right to prevent a patent being used to save the world. No one has that right. And the sooner we come to that realization, the oil companies have been buying up the patents, and because they want to get every barrel of oil out of the earth, get the last $1 trillion capitalized. These are mostly people that don't need any more money, that they have more than enough by far already, and yet they don't care, and they don't seem to care even about their own children and grandchildren. It's just it's a form of greed which is a disease, and heaven forbid that they should be allowed to get away with it any longer. I usually sort of introduce the fact that what we're talking about here is basically a spiritual thing where somehow we've let our standards down, and we don't mind cheating, and we don't mind making products with a shelf life of only a few years, and they have to be replaced, and people in many parts of the world have to bribe to get something done. So our moral standards have declined dramatically in the last, since I went into politics. Would you believe it's on June the 27th of this year will be the 70th anniversary of my first election.
Wow. Holy wow. Well, I got to congratulate you. I mean, you, like we mentioned when the first interview, which was about 5 years ago, when I mentioned that you are in your golden years, you said better make it diamond years. You redefine diamond, my friend, and you are in better health than most people 25 years your junior.
But I think one of the reasons I should put in a plug for my latest book, Hope Restored, is that the so-called shadow government that the late Senator Dan Inouye talked about, having its own Army and Navy and Air Force and living without any heed to the rules and outside the law. And then later, President Clinton, when Sarah McClendon asked him in the press gallery there why he didn't let people know the truth about UFOs and the extraterrestrial technology, his reply was, and I quote him, "Sarah, there is a government within the government, and I don't control it." End of quote. Now, this fact has never been really accepted by people because, as I guess the reason to put it bluntly, is when Allen Dulles was asked how he smuggled so many Nazis into the United States when he was head of the CIA and his brother was the Secretary of State, he said it's because Americans don't read books. And I'm afraid Canadians are the same. But you have to read books because you cannot get this information from any other source. You will never get it from newspapers, regardless of their credentials, because they're all under control. And all of the English language outlets, both print and electronic, are either owned or controlled by a Bilderberger, member of the Kabal that's been running the United States and much of the world for the last number of decades. And so we've got to get the truth out because the people of the United States have got to take back control of their country. They've lost it to this shadow government, which is really a part of the cabal. It's all connected as one great big wall of wax. And they've got to take back control if they're going to have a chance and if we're going to have a chance. So one of the suggestions that I've made in the latest book, Hope Restored, is that Congress has got to set up a joint committee, and it has to be nonpartisan. You know, I haven't been a member of any party since 2004, and the reason is because all of these issues that I'm talking about are not party issues. They're not partisan issues. They're people issues, and they have to be taken into account by people of all parties who have to start working together to try and get something done. And so the Congress should set up a joint committee to put a hold on the National Security Act. They've got to offer amnesty to the people who will come and tell the truth as to what's been going on in the last 70 years or so since July the 4th, 2047, because they have not been given the truth on any significant thing that I can think of from July 1947 down until the first thing where they got the truth was on the Russian interference in the election, and that was because the cabal wanted to condition the people of the United States for a possible nuclear attack. And so it fit their purposes to make it public, but nothing else that has happened of significance in all that period of time has been the truth, and billions of dollars were actually spent on what you call misinformation and disinformation to keep people in the dark. I was at a part of a panel in Washington 2013 where we had 6 former Congress people as pretending to be a congressional committee. And the 40 witnesses spoke from Monday until Friday. And of those 6 people who had been in Congress, there wasn't one of them that knew about UFOs and the ET business. Not one. And it took us all week to get the last skeptic convinced. Friday afternoon, when I was the last speaker, and I think he finally realized that things were not as he had believed them to be. They were raised in the narrow reality, and they were not prepared for what I call the broader reality. But you have to find out. So you have to have a committee. You have to offer amnesty to all of the people who want to tell the truth. And there are dozens and dozens of them who are just waiting to get a chance to tell the truth. But if they did it without an amnesty, why, they would wind up in jail. And so you're not going to get the truth unless the National Security Act is put on hold for a while, quite a long while, I would hope.
Long while, exactly, yeah.
Get that truth out. And if that happens and they find the truth, then the Congress will know what has to happen for Americans to reclaim their country. And that is our only hope. And it's the only hope for America. And so that's what I hope and pray will happen. And we've got to try and somehow get the message through to the people that can make it happen.
Well, this is good that we're doing this right now, and the event that you were talking about was the citizens' hearing, and as a matter of fact, 4 of those congressmen and women and the senator have been on the show multiple times. That was Mike Gravel, the senator, and there was, of course, Congressman Merrill Cook, Congresswoman Darlene Hooley, and Congresswoman Woolsey, Kathleen Woolsey, I believe was her name, and they all, like you said, were not believing you, anybody who testified at first. And slowly, one by one, they said it took them the entire week, just as you said, for them to finally realize things were going on. And when I asked them, who was the one person who you believed the most? And they said you, because you were a fellow politician from our neighboring country. Now, there's a couple questions in chat, if you want to take them, about these topics that we're mentioning. Would you like to hear them, or?
Sure, if we can. We've got a couple of minutes. We can do that.
We do, yeah. We got about 10 minutes left, so let me get to one. This first one is from Frankie Zomboy. What can the common person or poor person do to combat the bankers?
I guess the only thing you can do in any of these things is to say to your congressperson and your senator, dear sir or madam, we want you to do something. We want you to nationalize the Fed and to start creating government-created money, a lot of it, so that people won't be just limited to an existence, that they will have enough money to live decently and to do the kinds of things that are normal for people who have enough money to do it. And if you don't, when the next election comes around, we'll just go out in the streets and work night and day to try and make sure that you don't get reelected. Now, if you can get a few million Americans to say that sort of thing, and I somehow feel that if we can mobilize the young people that it would be realistic to expect it to work, then the politicians will pay attention. But that's the only kind of thing they listen to, because otherwise they listen to the big corporations who finance their election campaigns. Somebody was saying the other night where I was speaking that he asked the question, is it true that one vote equals $1? Well, I think he was just being a little cynical. But in other words, he was saying that the corporations that, and especially the banking system and the financial system, who put up these huge sums of money to get congresspeople and senators reelected,
Yes.
and presidents, they really think they're buying them, quote unquote. And this has been the case for a long time. And so we have governments in both of our countries that are far more interested in the rich elite than they are in the ordinary people.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the only way
Without a doubt.
way you can change that is to get a lot of people mobilized.
Well said. Now, this next question, I have one answer before I'm going to give it to you. It's, what is the best physical book I should read to inform myself? I say it's Money Mafia. What do you recommend?
Well, it's probably the most informative of the three that I have written. But the final 10 chapters of the latest book, Hope Restored, are important, because not only do I get into some interesting questions, including how God created the cosmos, and about the fight that's going on between the forces of right and light and the forces of darkness, and the wayward son, known as the evil one, and then I think those are important issues, because they come to the heart of the thing. And then the final chapter, 25, actually lists the things that the president and Congress have to do to regain control of the country and take back control of the country. So both of those books are important, and one has a lot of information on most subjects, and the last one has some critical information about a couple of critical subjects, but you can start reading at chapter 21 and just go from there to the end.
Now that we're mentioning your books, Mr. Hellier, might as well tell people where they can get them.
Well, they can get them from their local book dealer, or from Amazon, or from my website. If they want a personally autographed copy, they could get it from my website, which is paulhellierweb.com. That's Paul, P-A-U-L, Hellier, H-E-L-L-Y-E-R, web. Hellier is H-E-L-L-Y-E-R, web.com. And we'll send you out a personally autographed copy of the book.
And I guarantee you people here would definitely want that. So I encourage everybody to read Mr. Hellier's books. And as I mentioned, Money Mafia, because I haven't got my hands on Hope Restored. Money Mafia, of all the books that I've been sent over the last 7 years of me doing these shows, except for the 20 months I was off, I literally have to say it was by far the best. Now, here's another question for you, Mr. Hellier. Of the 62 families you said are controlling us, which three are at the tip of the spear?
I never mention the names of any of them as a matter of principle, but I think there are lists of the richest people in the world, and you can probably get them on the internet, and I think maybe the list is 400, but you can pick out the 62, I think, or most of them without too much difficulty.
Just speaking about your books, just so you know, I already see people in the chat saying they're getting one right now, so that's good news. I thank you, Mr. Hellier. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. I hope next time I have read the book and we could talk a little bit about some of the other issues and to see what kind of progress has been made in our world. Because every time me and you speak, we always mention not to just God bless you, but to all of God's children, which doesn't necessarily just include people from this planet, all of God's children, all
Right.
of the light beings out there, and I would definitely love to hear more from you. Before you go, is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience?
Not really, except that it's great to talk to you and to know that you have your health back and that things are moving along. It's very encouraging, and I think prayer has played a very important part in that. In fact, I'm sure it has.
It absolutely has, and I always say it's divine intervention that has brought me back. And thank you for constantly praying for me. I'm going to always be indebted for that.
You've been on my list every day since I met you.
Well, God bless you. Thank you again, and please tell Mrs. Hellier I said hello and good night to both of you.
I will do that, and all the best.
Thanks again.
Right.
All right,
Bye,
folks. That was the Honorable Paul Hellier, former Defense Minister of Canada. Like I said, we've been promoting this show for quite some time. He is freaking incredible, is he not? Yes, I have to say he is. Now, let me see if I can get my guest here, because I seem to be having a little bit issue of what I'm seeing on my darn screen here. Let me see what I can do. No, I don't want to share this. Okay, here we go. Let's bring in Tom Schaffer. Now we're going to shift gears, folks, and go on to consciousness. Tom Schaffer is an author. He's also a radio host, and he was my webmaster. He was actually the guy credited for creating this Dr. J logo. He was there when I switched from Rome, Researchers on a Mission, to Dr. J Radio Live. So he's also a very brilliant marketer. If you guys need websites, this is the guy to do. I hope he's hearing this right now, but he's going to find out that he just got a plug for his work. And so you definitely want to get his book. The reason is I've always argued that he is literally getting this book is labeled fiction, science fiction, in particularly, but it's not. I've always told Tom that I believe his book, Two and the Collectors, is real, is what our future is going to be. And it wasn't just me that said that. I know Jack Osborne said that. A lot of people said that. So, without further ado, we got Tom on. Tom, buddy, I just gave you a big plug-in for your work in your website for creating the Dr. J logo. And thank you for that too, by the way.
Absolutely, man. So it's good to reconnect here.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I had you on the show, so I'm finally glad in this last run since August, since I've been trying to get you back. We got it going tonight, because the last couple of times I needed you, which was last minute because I have you on my backup list, I decided let's use Tom, because the last two times you weren't unavailable, so I had to kick it to Agi and Nori or Robert, and yeah, those are the three I use right now. But
no problem. This is fun. I was like caught off guard, but I'm like, hey, this is great.
Yeah,
so, yeah, here I am.
And you know what? Remember, I was telling you that I wasn't sure if Paul was gonna call me and I'd have to bump it, and then it just worked out where he said, hey, do you mind if we do only 1 hour tonight, because I just got back and doing 12-hour days, and he was tired. And we didn't touch UFOs as much this time, other than acknowledging them, but we focused more on the cabals and the money, the Federal Reserve and the Trilateral Commission and that stuff. But now I told people we're shifting to consciousness. What can we do, Tom? This is my first question to you, bud. What the heck can we do to advance in human consciousness? The million-dollar question.
It's all about embracing our intellect and understanding the connection to the quantum universe. The thing is, we've all been told that that's for somebody else, or that it's for people with psychic abilities, or just a few here and there. But what's happening now is people are starting to realize their own consciousness has this connection to the quantum universe through principles like the law of attraction, principles of what people call co-creative powers, that we actually have super abilities that we don't even know we have. And as we begin to explore those abilities, things open up, stuff starts to happen. People start to see things, hear things, things happen. So it's all about realizing those inner abilities. And, they're not going to happen overnight for most people, but for some people they do. It's not like you can nail it down to, well, if you do this, that, or the other, this is going to happen. But as you begin to explore these areas, things start to open up. And that's what happened to me.
Now, let's talk about, and what you're about to mention is the downloads, right?
Well, yeah, for me it was a kind of a reawakening. Let me just give you a little preface, and I never really talked to you about this. And that is, we've all heard about when the MJ-12 documents were released. Do you remember that? We've all heard those stories, right?
That was when of course, I've been in ufology since '84. So when that literally became a story, I was, on it within a week.
Where did that happen? And a lot of people don't really know where that happened. It happened out on a part of the pre-internet, or the earliest part of the internet, called Usenet. And back on Usenet was where there were all these groups. Now, the groups got bought up and vacuumed up by Google. So if you go to groups.google.com, you can find all these interesting posts and ufology information from the 80s and 90s that's just been sitting out there. And I actually found some of the posts that kind of triggered the awakening in me towards ufology, and it's all part of this long journey. And part of those were, if you go out to groups.google.com, look up a guy named John Winston. He was a ufologist back then. I don't even think anybody knows who he was then or now. I really haven't heard much of him since, because a lot of the other names in ufology have pretty much eclipsed. Now it's turned into a list of A-listers who are out doing conventions and whatnot. But back then, I don't think you had as much going on. I mean, it was going on, but not to the extent that it is now. And I started reading, one of the groups out there was called Alt Conspiracy Area 51. And then there was another one, Alt Alien Visitors, a bunch of alt this and alt that, referencing ETs and ufology. And some of the most interesting posts were there. And it was all text. It was nothing to do with visuals or websites or videos or anything like that. This was all text. This was all writing. And I read some of the most amazing stuff out there about underground bases beneath Mount Shasta, the city of Telos, and people having channeling. And some of this stuff was like, wow. And then I remember I was kind of casually, and what you would do is you would subscribe your email program on your computer. You would subscribe to these groups, and then whenever something new hit, it would show up in your mailbox. And poof, here's another post by John Winston. Here's another post by somebody else. And the beautiful thing about those groups back then, it was all threaded. So you could follow the threads all the way back to where they started, and you could kind of pick up where people were interjecting here and there. It was very well logically thought out, not like Facebook, which is just a mess. But back then, it was very interesting to read some of this stuff, because some of these people were writing what you now see in books. They were writing posts that later became books. And so Winston was one of the more prolific people back then, and I really don't know what happened to him, but it sparked something in me that didn't kind of resurface until about 2013, when I met you and a few other people, and kind of all of a sudden I was kind of like given this resurgence. All of a sudden it was like, what's going on in ufology? Well, I don't know what's going on in ufology. So I started digging and started reading, and I saw that there was a lot of, as the more I got into it, I've always kind of had this feeling that, yes, of course, the ETs are real. We're not alone in the universe. They're getting here somehow. It's all, we don't know about what all that means. And I think during, we're talking 6 years ago, back then, it was the kind of the peak of how did they get here, and what is the mechanics, and what kind of equipment are they using, and what's their engines, and what about Bob Lazar and the 3 anti-gravity and the element 115 and all this stuff. Now, there's a shift going on. There's a big shift going on. It's no longer about how they got here. I think that what's being communicated now is the very things that Paul Hellyer was talking about in your previous hour. This concern for the planet, these political changes that need to occur with our own ballot box votes, with our own involvement. As a culture, Americans, we have all had kind of a coast it mentality. We just coast along and just kind of like hope politics does its thing and that we're all going to be okay. And just the status quo was a kind of a comfort zone. But we're no longer in a comfort zone of the status quo. Now things are so turbulent. The truth has become lies. The lies have become truth. And it's very difficult for people to sort out objective truth from personal truth. And so the only way you're going to get the right answers is to tap into your own consciousness, because you have all these voices out there. You got voices saying this and one guy says this, another guy, who's right? Well, the only way you're going to know is to go inside your own consciousness and get the answers from the cosmos, because they will come. The answers will come if you just open your mind to it. And we all say this. A lot of people say, well, if I just, oh, yeah, I'll open my mind. Well, when you do open your mind and the answers do come, it can be rather startling. You can go, what is that? Was that me? Or was that something that came through? And so you kind of go through this period where you're kind of in a, was that me? Or was that something I heard or whatever? So I got a prompting. The prompting was to write that book. The book was about an alien, an ET intervention of humanity. That, like Dr. Hellier was saying, that we're down to 1 minute on the clock. And my personal belief is that it will probably take an ET intervention. And I think they are doing this now with some of this, what we call downloads. These the people have been channeling for years. That's not new. But there are more and more people that are experiencing these weird things. I know people who have absolutely no belief in any of this stuff, who they know that I am, and they say, well, what is this? What's going on? I had something really weird happen, and or I had a weird dream, or I'm getting weird visions at night that I have no concept. What does this mean? So there is this massive amount of energy that's coming to the planet now, from the cosmic center of the galaxy, that's coming at the planet Earth, that's activating a lot of people. And a lot of people are referring to this as the shift, the event. The event is happening now, and a lot of this. And what it is consciousness is being activated in a higher degree right now.
I'm actually glad you mentioned UFOs, because I was wondering why we're not getting the sightings. Obviously, you look into YouTube, daily things are appearing, and you would think that with all the cameras that people carry around all the time in the form of smartphones, and then being in 4K, why are we not getting more and more footage? I mean, there should be a flood of craft and even aliens walking loose, unless there is something about digital photography that they're able to shut down more. But I get the feeling that maybe there is not really a wave going on for a particular reason, like it's time for us to learn more about consciousness, maybe?
Well, this is the thing, is I think that the lights in the sky thing is kind of played, because there's plenty of lights in the sky. And so now the thing is, and this is what Grant Cameron said. I kind of agree with this. He said, they start off with the circus and the sideshow and the lights and the craft to get your attention. But he believes, Grant Cameron, he's and I'm fairly, this resonates with me, is that they're moving towards consciousness now, and that it's okay. We had our little show. You guys know we're out here. Now you need to listen. And people say, well, why aren't they talking to us? Why aren't they on the radio? You have a radio in your head.
Yeah, pineal gland. That's your antenna.
There are scientifically proven quantum receptors within the brain. So that's already like, okay, we get past that moment. So what are they for? Well, this is where ESP occurs. This is where your dreams connect to the astral planes. This is where people connect with or disconnect and go on soul travel or astral travel. This is all part of that. And so for them, they've been talking. The question is, we've been all programmed to say, well, that's nothing. No, that wasn't anything. Never mind. That was nothing. So we've all been programmed to dismiss it and say, well, it didn't happen. No, it didn't happen. But it's even in the Bible, it talks about the still small voice of the infinite intelligence coming through. So we have to listen quietly And when we do, sometimes it's kind of freaky what comes through. And your first reaction, like I said earlier, may be to dismiss it. So for me, it's almost like they kind of got the message through to me that about, as well, you want to be a writer. And I like science fiction. And it's almost like something occurred within me like a memory. And you guys call it a download. For me, it was almost like a memory of the story, as if I had seen a movie already, and I'm writing down the movie about what I saw. That's what that book became. And as much as I would love to promo the book and tell everybody about the book, which we can do later, I'm less interested in promoting the book than I am making it into a screenplay. It's much better as a screenplay. So I'm working on some stuff like that's in the back burner. But the thing is, these things that come to us are huge in our heads. If we had a projector that could project it out, you'd be like, I think everybody's mind would be blown by what people are getting in their heads, that it's difficult to articulate, but it's happening. This stuff is happening.
Download. You know, I remember when Grant Cameron got it, it changed him so much. He never cared about UFOs and the White House and the presidents and who knew anymore. He is 100% focused on consciousness. That's right.
Absolutely. And so it's the same for me. I think the Bob Lazar story is interesting. You know, he's working on a craft, and I believe it. Yep, absolutely believe it. No problem. But that to me is less interesting than my ability to now get this divine intelligence. Well, not divine. I don't like the word divine because it invokes religion. But there's this infinite intelligence. I really resonate with the whole law of one thing. And some of it's a little weird, but there's a resonance there. And I don't want to be like David Wilcock, turning it into a new religion. That's scary. And in fact, that's what's in the law of one. They said, don't do that. Please stop doing that. We're trying to give you the cosmic truth here. Stop doing that. So that kind of stuff resonates with me, and it seems to make sense. It has a logical sense to it. And I've always been a fan of Star Trek, and so there's Mr. Spock in the back of my head that kind of resonates with the whole law of one thing. So if you're curious about, are they talking to us? Well, the cool thing about Law of One is it came during the late 70s, early 80s, before a lot of the internet, a lot of technology, and a lot of things that could invalidate it. It came through channeling. And it was so direct and it was so informational that it's difficult to believe that it wasn't true. I spoke with another guy who's actually been in touch with those folks. And a lot of people, as you begin to investigate the Law of One, you start to understand how this whole consciousness thing, our spirit body, our soul body, or our consciousness body, is just inhabiting this human experience for a short period of time as a test. We're all being tested. These are just tests, just your daily test. You know, you went through a severe test with your health.
Oh, geez,
I've been through
quite a few. You know, going through the windshield, the coma, and this last 20-month crap, and still dealing with it.
Yeah, so we're here to learn these tests, and according to Law of One, it's all about the whole one in the Law of One is all about learning about oneness. Well, what are we doing as Americans? Learning about independence. I'm an independent American, and really, this is a temporary experiment in separateness here on Earth. You just come down here to learn about separateness and being an individual, but it's really within the cosmos. There's a oneness that we evolve up towards. So, and that resonates with me. I really think that that's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what Paul Hellyer was talking about, this unification. You know, people talk about, well, you know, you're talking about the New World Order. Well, the New World Order, there's a false New World Order, but there's also a positive New World Order of unification. The entities that came through the Law of One were talking about how their class of humans evolved up and became a hive mind. And so that's, you know, I don't know how many million years ahead of us, but that's what they became. Or, you know, it could be 1,000. They said it could be one day, or it could be 1,000 years. It could take 10,000 years. It just depends on the individuals that are involved. And so humanity is racing towards what they call in the Law of One a harvest. It's what the Christians call the rapture or the end times or the apocalypse. And Law of One talks about the harvest. And it's who among the humans are going to move up to the next level. So they don't, and then there's a big discussion about, well, is it going to be an actual physical evolution? We're all going to turn into light body beings, or are we just going to feel a little weird? Are we going to be like the mutants in some of these movies? What's going to happen? Nobody really knows. There's a lot of speculation, but there is something happening. And the thing is that's giving me evidence for this is when people who have nothing to do with it start relating these weird experiences that are happening to them that they can't quite explain. And so there's been an explosion in social media about this kind of stuff. A lot of groups on Facebook that you can get involved in reference to the event. Specifically, the event is happening now is one of them. There's a lot of groups that about consciousness awakening and just, something is happening with the human consciousness that cannot be explained in academic terms. I went through an atheistic period. I had to discard a lot of beliefs that I had. I said, okay, I got to start from ground zero. But atheism does not solve some of these unknown larger questions of life. You can be comfortable in atheism, but only to a point in my head. There was just something, okay, fine. I can buy the fact that religions are toxic. I can buy that. Okay, I get all that. But you can't explain to me what's happening in the metaphysical, as another colleague, Chip Reichenthal, talked about these energies, these subtle energies. The science agrees that living beings are affected by subtle energies. And so some of these subtle energies are those metaphysical areas that atheism doesn't satisfy, that science and academics do not satisfy. They don't answer those questions. So I don't know that you can, me personally, I just see too much that's going on.
I want to hear something that I learned that I think was pretty interesting. When I had Clifford Stone on, who was part of the crash and retrieval,
right,
he said that the biggest question he had for the ETs, because he was raised in a religious family, was what's your religion? Who created us? I mean, if you created us, then who created you? And they essentially told him, we don't know. Somebody did. There's a God. And they basically said that the way you know religion is not entirely correct, but we have faith. That's all they wanted him to know. So faith in general is good, but they basically said that your religions are wrong, but also right. I don't know how you reconcile the two and point out what. I mean, is every one of the people who were the prophets just another, Jesus, Muhammad? I don't know about that, but I thought that was interesting that the ETs told him, have faith.
Yeah, and faith is accepting things without evidence. So I'm a skeptical believer, if you will. It's like trust but verify. Yeah. Is kind of my guideline. It's like I can't dismiss a lot of this weird stuff. It's like, okay, wait a minute now. I love the science side of things. I love all of that academic stuff. I'm not, I really want to adhere to, quote, rationality. And yet we have this thing about the law of attraction and the fact that what my colleague Augie's always talking about, he's always talking about the mind-created universe, that really what we're living is we created ourselves. And that's really quite true. And you'll hear this within Scientology. You'll hear this within people who study landmark education. You'll hear all of this about how we create our own world. And we've all got these baselines. We live on this planet, in this world, this what some people call the matrix. It's kind of a giant baseline that we're all in. But see, law of attraction, understanding your consciousness and your co-creative powers, all of this allows you to hack this matrix. You can literally hack the matrix with your own attitude and your own outlook, and through verbal phraseology, through mantras and statements, affirmations. You can literally hack this matrix. So those are the things that once you see it, you're like, wow, I want to learn more. So then you're willing to entertain things that are a little bit out there that may not fit what you learned in Sunday school. You may say, okay, wait a minute, maybe they've just been feeding me a line the whole time. What's really going on? And so there's a huge hunger from people to really find out what's going on, what's really going on. And I think a good part of it is, you're in ufology, everybody wants disclosure, but we get our own disclosure personally.
I got a couple questions for you here, if you want to hear them. Yeah?
Yeah, go ahead, hit me. I'm looking at the chat too.
Oh, you are? I'm looking at
Yeah.
Nicholas Cash. I'm going to go in order. Nicholas Cashmore's question. Can we use our minds to invite UFOs to our location?
Absolutely. There are people that are doing this now. I've never done it myself. I've actually, I've stood out taken the trash out by the dumpster and looked up and said, "Hey guys, are you out there?" But nobody has shown up. So it's all about alignment, I think, and getting our frequencies right. I had one person tell me that they cannot actually see lower vibration people. It's harder for them to see lower vibration people than it is to see physically. She was telling me it's actually physics, that they're on a higher vibration, a lot of them, and they can't see lower vibration creatures. So you have to get your vibration up in order for them to see you. This is what I've been told. I don't know if that lines up with what other people are saying, but this is what I was told.
Let me tell you, I know several people who do this. First of all, there's Robert Bingham, who was the modern day prophet Yahweh. Then came Fausto Perez, who learned from Robert Bingham, and then two other people he taught was Jim Martin and Jonathan Castro. Now, I myself did it one time. Only one time was I able to meditate for a couple minutes and ask them to come, and boom, there is a white orb. I was at a bar, I was outside, I called everybody out there, and everybody saw it. That was without question. Has it worked since? No. Like you said, some high vibration creatures cannot see us, like you said. And if we are vibrating at too low of a frequency when we do this, we're never going to get to them.
Correct. And let's see here, it's CE5. Yeah, Stacy mentioned CE5, and that's what Dr. Greer's been. That's been his. Right. He's been doing the whole mantra on that. I have a little question about his expensive campouts, but his theories and everything seem to be spot on. And I think that if it's just something you have to, it's like anything. I have another. We both know another guy named Nathan Tafoya.
Yes, we do. Great guy, great guy.
And Nathan was talking about it, and he said, yeah, it's really like practice. And for him, he said his opinion was that it was like practice. You just need to take the time, practice. And I haven't had a need to meet them, so I haven't really gone on this journey about the CE5 stuff. So it's something I definitely want to do, and I've been wanting to explore literally for a couple of years. But I've been going in a little bit different direction.
Too, drugs and alcohol make a big difference. And I'm not just talking about crack cocaine or heroin. I mean like alcohol, caffeine, nicotine. So when you do it, just make sure you're as clean and clear as can be. And I know you are already, so we don't have to worry about that. You won't even let me smoke cigarettes near you, for crying out loud. So
that's right. That's right.
So I know you know.
But no, actually, the thing is, being high vibration is not about being Pentecostal. Okay, being high vibration is feeling good in a place of happiness. And you can be that way. Actually, you can be that way on different kinds of drugs. There are people who have had ET experiences being on an acid and being on, what's the one that Terrence McKenna, DMT? Was it DMT? DMT,
ayahuasca, everything.
So there are those gateways, and a lot of people who are purists see those as shortcuts and like, you really need to learn how to meditate. Well, maybe nature gave us these things, and I met a woman at an ashram nearby me. There's an ashram. What is
an ashram, by the way?
It's just an Indian. It's an Indian style living arrangement, kind of a community, not a commune, but a community. They've got like 80 acres near here, and they help the community. They do homeless outreach. They do all kinds of cool stuff. And one of the women that works there told me, she said, these are what we call plant teachers. And I'm like, oh, really? So she was talking about mushrooms and marijuana and these other things that expand consciousness. George Carlin referred to marijuana as the values-changing drug. So this is why it was such a recoil during the 60s with people smoking pot, because I came up during the 70s. I was in high school during the 70s, and so I remember the people from the 40s who fought in World War II It was all about being on point and being serious about life and being on point. It was a kind of a mindset about this idea of just screwing around, smoking pot, and just having a good time. I mean, people, wake up. You need to get serious. And so there was this drastic shift. But see, realize too that back then, this was the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Now that we're in the age of Aquarius, and so this was during that time when it was really starting to start. Minds were opening, people were opening, consciousness was expanding. And so you look at the Beatles going to India, did a lot of acid, went to India, tapped in. And, you know, like I say, some people see LSD as a shortcut, but it does break down barriers, and it can be very, very therapeutic, and it can be very mind expanding, literally. So these things are, I like that term that she used, being plant teachers. I thought that was a great idea, because according to Terence McKenna, you know, he says you go back to the mushroom dotted plains of Africa, and it was that the mushrooms that actually caused the mental jump from just, you know, being ignorant tribes people on the plains to starting to get complex thoughts and starting to invent things and move up evolutionary. That it wasn't just an ET visitation, but it may have been Earth itself, something in the spores, in the mushrooms, the psilocybin, these things open. We have the receptors. They're in the brain.
Of course we do. Yes. And so, like I said, I know several people who have had contact with those in different ingredients.
Absolutely.
I've actually heard DMT, of all of them, is by far the one that's going to get you to see something as far as like interdimensional or AT. Which
that's exactly what I've heard. I've never had any myself. I listened to Terence McKenna talk about his little machine elves, and it's like I just love to listen to him talk, because he's such a well, it's too bad he's gone now. I think he died during the late 90s or 2000s. Something like that.
That sucks.
Yeah, he was an amazing wordsmith. The thing that I liked about Terence McKenna, and this kind of gets back to where we started, was the idea that we need to embrace intelligence. There's a certain dumbing down of society towards kind of sports and entertainment. I love sports, and I don't love sports, but I like entertainment. I love good sci-fi. My favorite lately is Star Trek Discovery, and I like the Orville. Okay, we like to be entertained, so I'm not downing anybody for that. But this entertainment, it distracts us. You know, it's not where we really want to be, and it tends to dumb us down. And we don't want to embrace intellect. We don't want to embrace larger thoughts. We don't want to make more than one sentence to a paragraph. We want everything simple and stupid. So I kind of hit that point in my life about 20 years ago. I said, I'm not going to embrace talking stupid. I'm not going to embrace being stupid. I want to embrace the full intellect of my mind. I want to let my mind go ahead and be intelligent. I don't want to apologize for being intelligent. And it cost me dearly growing up. You know, I was given a big engine. I was given this bigger engine for whatever reason. It was just, genetic lottery, who knows? But always the smart kid, always the kid in the science class, always the kid in electronics. And so there are people like that get ridiculed in society. And I said,
I was ridiculed for being in the math club.
Okay, there you go. And so I went out of my way to be a C student in high school because I didn't want to be seen as the smart kid. I just kind of took a bunch of classes that were easy in some study halls and really kind of just skated through high school, really didn't try that hard, and I earned a nice C average. But people shouldn't be that way. They shouldn't feel compelled to dumb down to fit in or be accepted. They should go for their intellect, go for the intellect. Start to meditate, start to understand your consciousness. You were given this mind for a reason, not to just dumb it down on TV all day long or to engage in kind of stupid conversations about what's on Instagram or to become an Instagram star. These are such shallow things that we've been given this amazing mind and body to experience this planet with. And so that's the kind of the little revelation that kind of came to me. And I decided, you know what? I'm an Imagineer. That's what I do. The imagination is the playground. I love it. I love being an Imagineer. I love writing when I have time. I love discussions and conversation and talking about cosmic things. And when I get around people who don't, it's kind of uncomfortable. It's just like, not that I'm going to force something on them, but I just love talking about these things. I like to be around those kind of people.
Amen to that. Now, let me read this other question that's been sitting here for quite
Sure.
some time.
Hit me.
How do you get into the fourth and fifth dimensions?
Well, from what I understand, these densities, they call them, the densities are, I think we're in third now, we're going to fourth, and fourth is all about love, and I think fifth is wisdom. So these are areas that we make decisions to go towards. Now, back to Law of One, according to them, all you just need to do is just start moving in that direction. Just start moving towards intellect, start moving towards positivity, just move in that direction, and you're going to be okay. That a lot of this religion that's been put on us is that we somehow have to earn it, or kill a chicken, or have a blood sacrifice of some kind in order to attain the next level, or that you have to be part of a guru community. You've got to go to India or you're just not going to get it. It's not about that. It's really about just focusing your direction, your thoughts, and grabbing a hold of the reins of grabbing the wheel and deciding you're going to move in that direction. And I've, even from everything I'm reading, it doesn't take a lot of work. This is not a lot of work. It's really just a series of decisions about to move that direction, and we're going to evolve up.
There's no doubt it. As a matter of fact, I don't know what people think about Billy Meyer, but I heard something interesting. I don't know what people think about the photos, particularly of like him in the solar system from different angles, which couldn't have been possible unless he had technically been there, and even different times. And he was shown the 7 stages of evolution. So when the end of the plant as being at the top of the food chain is the start of insects. And what it showed was basically this green plant, but it started to have insect features. So it's a green plant living in the ground coming up, but what you see is a head and eyes and what looks like the first 2 arms to grow. And they said to him is that this is the first step. And then you get insects, and then on and on and on until you get to you, which is the final step. But then you don't stop that evolvement where we are. You continue to evolve with expanding your consciousness.
Right. So the whole evolution towards those higher densities, I forget. From what I've read, it can take thousands of years or it can take a year. Just depends on the individual, and the average individual doesn't get that. And a lot of this has been taken from us. That these basic knowledge about this process of what people call ascension or growing up and awareness
and
or being awake.
Us down too, Tom. And
they gave us false religions. I mean, they gave us all these false religions that externalize God. Now, really, this is a big concept that a lot of people don't quite get. By externalizing God to another individual, you reduce your own recognition of your own divinity. That even Jesus said, I've tried to tell you people that you're gods.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So a lot of people don't realize,
you're
right, that there's this inner divinity. It's not really a holiness kind of thing. It's just a cosmic consciousness that's connected to the infinite intelligence. And see, this is the part where religion takes from people. It puts whether or not you deserve it, whether or not you love Jesus enough, whether you not worship God enough, and all that God worship and all that is Jesus watching me stuff is all false. He, according to Law of One, back to Law of One, they said, yeah, he was just kind of another guy there in the fourth dimension. He was a higher developed fourth dimensional being who decided to come to this dimension to show people love. That was all he was trying to do. And so the religions were brought here by these ET races to enslave us, because what the religions do is they externalize God as an entity somewhere else that you can't be. You can't be God, according to all religions. God is something else. And I even hear people in public places and on TV, even newscasters, and they everybody says thank God, as if it's a separate entity from us that we are not. that there's this all-powerful being out there that we can never be. And yet a lot of the ancient texts and a lot of these they all talk about the personal divinity. And then when you start to explore it, it's not complicated. It's just part of you. It's your quantum connection to the universe. It's the you who never goes away. It's the forever part of you, that's connected to what a lot of people refer to as your higher self, that's out there right now, allowing you to be here.
There's another question and a comment here that I was hoping you'd comment on, because I already know the answer, and it's about remote viewing. And another person, I believe it was Lasha, that followed up and said that we all can remote view, and I believe that.
I believe that, absolutely.
So you do too.
Absolutely, I think all of these things are possible for all of us.
That's right.
See, when you get into the quantum realm, this is the cool thing about the quantum world we're moving into now, or the era of quantum acceptance is what I'll say. Maybe I just coined a term. But the era of quantum acceptance is now upon us, where people are saying, well, according to quantum mechanics, science agrees that you can have anything you want. You can have any kind of world you want. You can have any kind of matrix you want. You can have any kind of universe you want. Anything is possible in the quantum era. This now that people are like, wow, wow. I mean, it's possible? Yeah. All that pseudoscience they made fun of, Edgar Cayce, they made fun of him. They made fun of all that stuff during the 1800s. Guess what? All that stuff is possible.
Possible and true. That's right.
It's all possible. Things like the law of attraction. People, I remember that really kind of hit big with The Secret.
That's right.
Was it about 2007 or 8, somewhere, or 9, somewhere in there?
Over a decade ago, for sure.
Yeah, and that popped out. And people now, the idea of having a vision board on your, that's all common. So people are accepting that they can now hack the matrix because it's quantumly possible. The whole spooky accident at distance, even though Einstein wasn't comfortable with it, he acknowledged it,
Here's something. Frankie Zomboy wants to know who gave us the false religions.
Well, you can go back to, some people say it was all about the Anunnaki. Others say it came from the Orion group, that there was a race of ETs that came from Orion, that they used these false religions as a means of enslaving people mentally. They didn't just come in and decide to just take over and build cities, but they used these false religions as a kind of a subtle little wedge to get in there. And so through the marketing of these religions, 2,000 years of marketing Christianity, 2,000 years or 1,700 years of Islam, whatever, pick a religion, thousands of years, Hinduism, all of them. All these religions, after thousands of years, have been marketed into all these different geographic zones. So your genetic lottery, you wake up in India and now you're a Hindu, and you wake up in Mecca and you're into Islam. You wake up in America and you're a Christian. Okay, so it's all been foisted upon these regions and reinforced through these, quote, cabals or ruling powers, as Dr. Hellier was talking about earlier. These things have been reinforced through popular mainstream reinforcement. And so everybody just accepts that there's this magic sky god out there that's looking down on us. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. The God you're looking for is within you.
And like you said, Jesus did say that, and it's in the Bible.
It's in the Bible. If you got to have the Bible, and then the Bible in itself is a collection of, it's an incomplete reference. And a lot of it is also been added in. There are people that believe that whatever Paul had to say was just stuffed in there. It had nothing to do with, it was all his opinions and shouldn't be in there. So you have all this discord with what should be in the Bible and what was taken out. Then you have the Gnostic Gospels, which are another area that people need to read if they want to find out a little bit more about some of those old ancient texts. So we haven't had the full story. And so that's why there's such a hunger now for the real truth. What did happen to Atlantis? What happened to Mu? What happened to Telos? What happened to all these ancient in the before time? What was really going on? What got stripped away from us? How did we get ripped off? How did we wind up where we are today? So that's what people really want to know.
That's true. That is true. Now, where do you see us in, say, 30 years?
If we make it,
If we make it is the key.
I don't know. It's really right now. I think this is really. I can't even think 30 years, but I think this is one of the most critical times right now. And people said that 10 years ago, but I still think we're in such a critical moment that we have to kind of pay attention moment to moment. And really be focused on the moment. Where we could be in 30 years, we could be in utopia in 30 years if we really wanted to. If we really wanted to be in our own utopia. For example, I'm really amazed that there are people talking about basic income. Dr. Hellier was talking about basic income earlier.
Yeah.
This is being floated by the Democrats. It's being floated by some others. I think it's great. I think once you get past all of the knee-jerk, and this is another thing that we've been programmed with. Well, if the man's going to eat, he's going to have to work. Well, the work's being taken away. So what are you going to do? You're going to have millions of people starving as automation takes over and jobs become irrelevant.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Tom, because when I had Gerald O'Donnell on, who teaches remote viewing, as a matter of fact, he said, look at Uber. First, it came out in a response to the 2007 economy crash to give people a way to work to provide for themselves. What is it doing now? It's dropping what it pays people, and it's moving towards autonomous cars. So the idea of
Uber
giving
was a
it
moment.
to people, and now it's going to what they want it to be. No, driverless cars.
And a lot of people, they talk about, they've been programmed to think, well, your taxes are paying for all this. Your taxes are paying for a portion. But if they taxed everyone at 100%, it would still not fund the government. You couldn't fund the government off of taxes. I think that's another myth that's been foisted upon us to kind of keep people in line. It's a way of oppressing people and keeping them in line. You better stay at your job and you better pay your bills and don't look up and don't think about any of this weird stuff that Tom's talking about, because you just need to pay attention and keep your job and feed the capitalists and keep the corporatists happy. That's what our society has become. Anybody that talks outside of that, you're just a weirdo, dude. You need help. So, but it's happening in spite of that. That's what's interesting is all of this awakening is happening in spite of it. People are hitting a wall. There's a very famous guy I met several months ago. He was famous in sports. What do you call it? He was selling a sports program and some weightlifting and some fitness products and everything else. And he just hit a wall and walked away from it. He just soured. So a lot of people, they're hitting these walls. They're at a job and they're like, what am I doing here? This has nothing to do with. They're getting like this awakening moment. This epiphany is hitting them, and they're like, what am I doing? And then they're going down the rabbit hole. They're trying to get answers to these questions. So
we got about 7-8 minutes left, and I want to make sure there's time for you to plug in everything that you need to plug in and to give the thanks to the people I need to and all that stuff. So if you have any topics that we haven't covered yet, now would be a good time.
Well, there is a question in your chat room here. Let's just address this one here. Nicholas, he says, what is the best way to increase our vibrational power?
Good question. I'd like to hear
that. I think it's very simple. I think that it's really simple. It's all about feeling good. Once you start feeling good, and it's what other teachers have told me. In fact, my compatriots, Nori, one of her phrases is to just make a decision to move one little notch closer towards positive. And then if you're feeling negative, and the more you move your mind positive, feeling good, listening to good music, getting quiet. And a lot of people don't know what meditation is. It's really just getting quiet for a minute and just kind of staring off into space. That's meditation. So if you can do that, you can meditate. You can just go down to the beach and stare at the water.
Let me say, I actually, that is a great way, and that does work. I love staring at the waves. But Augie taught me something that was the first time in about 20 years that I was able to finally stop my thoughts dead in their tracks. And he told me, because that was my biggest thing with my meditation, is to cannot quiet the mind. And he said that start to stare at something that has a vertical line. So I picked the blinds. And he said then slowly start to cross your eyes comfortably where you start to see two of these lines. And I did. Then he says close your eyes. And what that does is it gets your mind to have something to do. It's occupied, and therefore instantly your thoughts are shut off.
Hey, if it works, who can argue with that? And that's the
right.
whole thing, is keeping your mind open to some of this stuff and not being dismissive, because all of these things that have been stripped from us are out in the difficult to explain areas, the paranormal. All this stuff is difficult to explain. I was pretty tough on a lot of it because I'm a skeptical believer. So I want to really, I'm trying to attach that logical side of my brain to this, and you can't. The part of me that works, that part of me that gives me my artistic abilities, my writing abilities, it doesn't like the corporatist logical side of the mind. It doesn't like that. There needs to be a balance. And in order to meditate, you've got to kind of stop all that stuff and get into a place of quiet where you can just kind of sit. And like you said, find that way to kind of quiet down for a minute. And it's not about, sitting in a lotus position with your hands of certain. That's fine if you can do that. But really, sometimes it's just a matter of just, sitting and daydreaming. Sitting and daydreaming is a form of meditation. So that's, but there are some comments here that I agree with too. Exercise and diet and are always good too. They will help you move towards a positive, quote, positive vibe. Just like the Beach Boys said.
They did.
Good vibrations. Keep
good
those
vibrations.
Good.
That's
hey,
right.
Isn't that right? Look at all the lyrics that came out of the 60s and 70s. All the lyrical music, that was so cosmically conscious. Now, I don't hear a lot of that. You just don't hear it. And people, the 70s stations have been rocking hard for the last 30 years. That's 40 years. So, but it was all good.
Now we got about 4 minutes left, and I wanted to...
Okay, my links. Yes, my links. Okay, if you go to freepeopleofthecosmos.org, there's not a lot going on there. It just explains what it's all about. And you can check out my channel, Free Cosmos, on YouTube. And I've started doing a few shows. I haven't had too many guests lately, so I do shows intermittently. But I'm also on Broadcast Team Alpha, which is broadcastteamalpha.com. You can see me over there. We'll be on tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Aggie and Nori.
With me, it'll be the three of us. And should be interesting. So
everybody in the chat should know exactly who Aggie, Nast, and Nori Love are, because they've been on the show a couple times.
That's right. Yeah, this is all part of the I talk about cross-pollination. We got to get you on there at one of these points.
Get you on anytime.
Absolutely.
Just let me know.
Absolutely. Well, you're on every night. I don't know when you're available. When you're going to be available.
We'll find a day. Don't worry.
That's right. We'll figure it out. But thanks for having me on, man. This has been fun. I really appreciate you having me on.
It's been months over 8-9 months in the making. I asked you then, back in August, if I can keep you as a backup guest, and you said yes. And we tried a couple of those times, and then I had to give it to Robert or Nori or Aggie or whoever else is on my backup list. But I told you those last two times, you're next, Tom. You got to be ready. So you
all in
ready.
Good time, my friend. All in good time. It's all supposed to happen when it's supposed to happen.
And it happened right after Paul Hellyer, so that worked.
That's
out
right,
great.
buddy. Yeah,
right.
Appreciate it big time.
Well, let me give some shout-outs. First of all, iHeartMedia, thank you for carrying what you call fringe work, fringe science, even though we call it science and facts. All right, folks? Science and facts is what we're talking about here. All right. Also, I want to thank Joe Montaldo of UPRN 107.7 and all you fine folks in New Orleans. And, of course, I want to thank JC and all his fine people at Deprogrammed Radio in the UK and EU. And, of course, Spreaker, I think SoundCloud definitely. I don't know about Spotify. All those places. Check them out. They all carry this show. And remember, folks, you can listen to the show ad-free if you go and get the paid archives. They're only $4 a month. And even though it only goes back to this past August, we are going to upload everything back to 2013, folks. So you'll have everything I've ever done, plus exclusive content to Patreon customers and, of course, to the archives only. Or you can listen to them for free on YouTube. Of course, live is pay attention to the chat, because that's the only chat that I do watch. As you see, I'm constantly posting in the chat as often as I can. And yeah, keep the questions coming. The guests always love them. And they always ask if there are questions on the show, and I said, by all means. So just, thank you guys for participating, guys and gals. And that's the next group of people I want to thank, is you people, my listeners. You are the most important people. You are the reason I do this show. Please be proactive and have an open mind. Take what you learned and pass it along. That's what we have to do, is educate everybody. And of course, I want to thank Tom Schaffer, my guest, my friend, my old webmaster, who I hope and somehow can come back and get rid of the Indians. As nice as they are, we need Tom back. So we'll work on that too.
we got to figure that out.
Yeah. And final things is I want to thank Pam Vrettenberg, my social media manager. Check out her website, unitedtruthseekers.com. And of course, I want to thank Josh Cheres, my assistant producer and VP of operations. He's moved up, Tom. Got to hand him
Wow.
for actually staying low key,
Hey,
and
Josh.
for doing a lot of work behind the scenes. So he's moving up in this world, and I'm very proud of him. And I guess other than that, folks, I always say this. All you have to do is remember the name of the show. Every social media account that you could think of is at DRJ Radio Live, as is the website, drjradiolive.com. With that being said, I am signing out from La La Land. Good night, folks.